Hey everybody, welcome to week 284. And we are we've got more tech in this room now, like it actually is a podcast studio, and which is really cool, but we're learning new stuff. So hopefully you guys can hear me all right. All right. Is that right? Yep. All right, cool. So guess what? Not only is this week 284, but it's the last broadcast, the last weekly webinar of 2025, because next week at this time it is Christmas. And the following week, we are going to be celebrating New Year's Day. So, uh, we'll sing Old Lang Syne to 2025. Adam is teed up to do a solo on that, and I'm sure we're all going to be loving that. And while before he does that, though, he's going to give us an opening tirade, and then we'll go over to Jack. So go
Yeah.
for it.
Um, so I didn't listen to the speech last night because it's when you wake up at 4 a.m., Gary, 9 p.m. is past your bedtime.
Yeah.
But I did read some of the commentary this morning, and the thing that kind of jumped out at me in the commentary was the discussion around the benefits of the One Big Beautiful Bill tax cut, which again, I'm a big fan of tax cuts, by the way, as a taxpayer. But one of the commentary that I was reading was just talk what was like, well, the fact check it, technically, the Reagan tax cut resulted in more of a tax savings. Yeah, like it was, but it was the second biggest. So it's like, way to go, you're second biggest, not first biggest. But the point of all of that is just a gloomy reminder of the reality of what would have to happen, and it doesn't matter if it's a Republican or a Democrat, to make all of this work. In the sense of, you know, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act reduces revenue by about 1.5%. And by revenue, I mean like that's the intake, on the tax side. But what we spend was already more than what we brought in. That's so if you just think about like what the US economy has to grow at to fit that surplus, barring radical cuts, it's it's like 5 or 6%. Which it's never done in our lifetimes or our parents' lifetimes outside of like rebounding after a massive recession. So it's been extremely so I guess, Jack, we could do it if we just go into recession first. So it's one of those things where it's like it feels good, but it's just not possible. And I think that the other thing related to that I just wanted to share that was a funny story, is they're talking about the changes to, should we extend the additional healthcare subsidies under the ACA and all that kind of stuff. I was in a tax planning meeting with a client the other day, and he saw this line that said "other taxes," and he's one of my favorite guys. He libertarian as myself, very smart. He's like, "Other taxes? What are other taxes?" And I said, "Dave, that's where the net investment income tax and the Medicare surtax goes that's paying for ACA." So one would presume that if you're going to not have ACA, that tax would go away. So there's always like a little gap in terms of there's always a gap in terms of like what goes out for ACA versus what comes in. It's just that, Jack, you want to see a riot. There's going to be a riot if you keep on taxing me, but you remove the benefit. Like I'm not receiving any ACA benefits, by the way, but I'm just like I can accept it as a taxpayer. I'm paying for somebody else's benefit, but the hell you say, you're going to continue to collect the revenue, but not give the benefit. Like now we got a real problem on our hands. So,
Yeah. I don't
so
care what party you're
yeah,
in.
yeah, it's hard to get behind that, in any way, shape, or form. So I just, it's just one of those things where like, hey guys, like just gonna have to accept some reality in here. Like, yeah, like these are easy problems to solve. They'd already been solved. They're all difficult to solve, and they all require pain and suffering. So
Yeah.
tirade done.
Nobody wants pain and suffering because nobody gets elected for anybody that's promising pain and suffering. Free stuff for everybody.
Yeah, no, I guess the last guy that probably said that was Winston Churchill when he said, there will be blood, there will be sweat, there will
Yeah.
be like he wasn't promising rainbows and unicorns, back in 1939 or whatever it was when he said that.
And all that happened, and then he didn't get reelected.
Yeah, he got thrown out, after a
One of the best
successful
leaders the
yeah,
free world ever
it's
had.
yeah, a successful rally of the entire world and then gets done. It just goes to show you, it doesn't matter how good you are, eventually you start rotting.
Right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Well, Jack, what do you have to add to that? As well as, we've talked about, hey, wouldn't it be interesting? Could be very revealing if we followed the money trail and eat, the path of where each percentage of a dollar goes, right? Because I be careful what you wish for and what you examine. But if you want to find some money or find where, hey, there's a possibility that we've just gotten lazy and look at all these subscriptions that we're paying for that we're not even using or whatever, right? So I mean, that's a good family one. But let's talk about the business side. Anything you would add before we jump into that?
I was thinking about, well, I'll make a comment about the follow the dollar in a moment, but I was thinking about, what could we talk about other than that? And, as part of the first few minutes, and there's so many things that we could talk about. In fact, that are not even politically driven necessarily about what's going on around the world, what happened last night, the reactions to it and everything else. But I will direct you to, as we typically do, which is just go to channel 114 and 117 on your XM radio and flip them back and forth every few minutes, and then you will hear both sides of the same story without realizing that you're hearing the same story or the same event. So, but the way this topic kind of came about is one of my partners, Phil Chubb, has always said for the past several decades, follow the money, follow the dollar. And it's in light of or with respect to transactions as to, okay, if you have a purchase price being paid and we represent the seller, where can that money be taken back? And so, what is normal course for a business? Where has it been allocated? What has the seller been spending it on and showing to the buyer? As buyer, you want to know where that money is being spent and where you might do things differently. Many buyers will buy a business thinking that they can improve it, either functionally or monetarily, meaning throw some money at it and just economies of scale, get it beyond a point where the current owners were not able to go beyond. So there was a ceiling that was created for whatever reason. And you have an influx, whether it's private equity, whether it's a strategic buyer, whether it is just someone that is looking to bolt on some capacity or skill set. So you have that addition, and you want to know kind of where the dollars are spent. But I don't think that over the course of doing these webinars have we gone into necessarily. We've talked a lot about it, but have we, dissected a dollar, and then into various cents and categories and buckets. And so went through that, was thinking about that. and then came up with some ideas. And then, of course, I'm like, okay, well, let's see if artificial intelligence can improve upon that. And one of the suggestions that it had was, well, or it asked me what kind of, um, it said essentially what kind of lifestyle does the owner have or want to have, combined with who is the potential buyer. And it was not just financial buyer necessarily, like a private equity. It was succession plan, like within the family, kind of thing. So it was very interesting to see all of that. And I thought, well, that'd be something pretty cool to share. So we can continue to talk about that and go into the details about that. But I don't know, Adam, if you have anything, just general statements about that before we kind of go into the next level of weeds on this.
Yeah, I appreciated you bringing this topic, Jack, because it's always been kind of a hot button for me, because when we get a lot of times we're like, well, I mean, couldn't you get like a little bit more gross profit, or couldn't you get like a little bit more? So, hey, you don't understand. This is just the industry, like you know, a general contractor, like it's a classic, statement. Just hey, it's just always got to be this way. So what I did, my different version of this is that I one time went back and looked at, okay, what if I took Walmart as an example and just looked at Walmart, who's the last time I checked, Jack, they're the low price leader, right? So like
Yep.
you would think, 1%, No, the reality is like once you look at their gross profit, which is just ignoring for the cost of the actual merchandise in the store, um, they're making they're flowing 25 cents of every gross profit dollar down to the bottom line. And that's with, all the executive board, stock incentives, blah, 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 that a Walmart's gonna have. I'm like, well, damn, if Walmart can do that, like why can't every business do that? Well, it's because they know how to watch the dollar. So I'm looking forward to this, Jack.
Yeah.
All right. So, what I want to go through, so it is, and I will put up, maybe I'll just, well, if I put it up, then it kind of shares the entire story at one time. So let me build up to that and talk about, so imagine the chart which I'm going to show you on the y-axis is the um what the categories are as far as use of the various cents within 100 cents in a dollar. And then on the x-axis, it is the type of buyer or type of lifestyle, etc. So I'm going to go through what each of those are, and then I'll show them to you. So the first category is cost to deliver product and service. And basically, that's categorized as what it takes to keep the lights on, deals with direct labor, materials, and cost of goods sold, freight and fulfillment, production software, warranties, and those kind of things. Um, and Category two is growth engine, so sales, marketing, business development. What creates the next dollar of revenue? So what is the investment? And within that are sales team compensation, marketing programs, lead generation, customer success, strategic partnerships. Category three is management and infrastructure, otherwise known to many of us as overhead. What it takes, and the way it was couched was what makes the business transferable. So, what are those fixed costs that are going to be inherited likely by your buyer because they are necessary in most cases in order to operate the business. And, unless the seller is really missing the mark and spending a lot on overhead, then what is it that is being spent on those fixed costs to produce the products, provide the services, that kind of thing. Um, Risk, compliance, and insurance, what prevents one bad event from wiping out 5 good years? We've talked, and this is a side note, that when we've talked about reviewing your operating, so there's kind of in my mind two types of insurance. One is about the person and one is about the business. So on the ownership level, we're talking about whether it's key man insurance, key person insurance, whether it is that, what happens if somebody gets hit by a bus and you need to buy out the other partner pursuant to the operating agreement? Is there enough funds to do that, or do you need some sort of supplement in the form of insurance? The second kind of category of insurance is insuring against risks that are associated with your business. And whether it is errors and omissions, if it's, for example, professional services entity, or is it that you're making stuff, or you are make bolting on stuff onto someone else's stuff and then selling it as an aggregate, or if you are merely part of the supply chain and you have either actual or constructive possession of those goods. So therefore, you are part of the chain of custody. And when something falls apart or something injures or kills somebody, you're going to be in the line of fire because you were part of the process of getting the product from point A to point C in the hands of the end user of the customer, et cetera. So, item 5 is reinvestment in innovation. What keeps today's success from becoming tomorrow's stagnation? We've talked about that in the past about being innovative. I think we talked a lot about it during COVID when many businesses were shut down or slowed down, what you need to do to go to the next step. What kind of technology have you invested in? What kind of technology should you have invested in by that time? I will share that, two things. One is that our electronic platform was set up for remote work. We weren't fully using it until COVID. And then I will also say that a lot of schools and universities who were already using electronic platforms like, what's the one, Canvas, that had functionality were able to continue operating because they had that functionality, whether it was in use or not. The software, the program had that capability, so they were able to move forward. In today's day and age, now you have the challenges of the use of artificial intelligence. So how are you leveraging off of that? I mean, I get hit, and I'm sure all of you get hit with all kinds of spam email offering to teach you all about artificial intelligence and then sell you a product that will implement what they just taught you after they have hooked you into that. I will say similarly, my folks here, let's say maybe some of the older folks that are in my shop that have not fully embraced the use of AI. We use a product called Harvey. Once I showed them what it could do and what it did to one of their job documents, they were very impressed and wanted to learn more about it. And now all of a sudden are very interested in doing that. So I would say again, taking a tangent off on this is that something that we've talked about in the past about being aware of what's going on in your office, being aware of those who are willing to embrace technology and those who are resistant to it, and finding out why they are resistant to it. Asking those questions, not putting your head in the sand and say, well, there's plenty out there. If they are self-motivated, they will learn how to do it. I don't think that that is the best plan in implementing and reinvesting in innovation. The next category is owner return, so profit distribution. So essentially, what owners get to keep in the form of distributions, debt service. So, what are you paying for in the form of borrowing money, cash reserves, and then strategic optionality, which is basically a fancy way of saying what are your options moving forward other than in a direct line of continuing to sell services and products. What again, and as you'll see, a lot of this is intertwined with each other as we talk about it. And so I will, let's see if I can put this up in the big reveal, if I can get it up on the screen.
We need some suspense music.
I know, really. Let's see, where did it go? Oh, there it is. All right. It got stuck behind some other windows. All right. I need to share screen 3. Okay. All right. Can you guys see that?
It's coming up now.
Okay.
There we
Yep.
go. Make it
All
bigger.
right. Make it bigger. How about
Better.
that? Okay. All right. So, if I had time, I'd make it pretty and do different colors and everything else. But, so as I said, you see the things that we talked about on the y-axis, on the vertical, which is the things that we talked about as far as categories, and then it adds these last three kind of categories, as far as the objective. It talked about owner dependence and interdependence. We've talked about that before as to, if it's you, yourself, and you have a lot of stuff in your head and it's not really transferable. You have two options at that point. Buyer has two options, which is to keep you on board for a period of time until they have extracted all of that from you.
It's actually funny,
Or
Jack.
yeah,
I'm sorry, you're in the middle of a tirade, and I just
yeah,
got to
yeah,
point out, like, the thing that jumps out at me immediately in this that is freaking hysterical to me, and I swear this isn't because we have we have BGW Growth, which owns a Sandler franchise, but if you look at that middle one, which is like the owner lifestyle, lowest
yeah.
multiple, you kind of see a little sloppy and lazy on the cost to deliver the product. You do see, hey, a lot of money going to the owner's pocket. You see almost no investment in sales and marketing, and then you see
Hmm.
almost no investment in innovation, or management infrastructure. And then, like, you're mad that your company's not saleable.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
Like
true.
it just sticks out at, like, I make a lot of money, Jack. Like, why would I make any of these investments? Because of that reason, jackass.
yeah, and I should have put the disclaimer that these are not the views of any of the three of us, or at Shoemaker, or at BGW. And I really don't, again, I don't know where
It's a
ChatGPT
collective
is.
wisdom of the internet.
That's
Yeah,
I
ChatGPT.
just happen
allegedly.
to, yeah, I just happen to agree with it.
Yeah, right, right, right. So, I mean, it's again interesting that you see that the shift of, and they're not significant shifts within the categories themselves. So really, and if anybody has any comments or thoughts about, whether they agree, strongly disagree, we're happy to chat about that and continue on with that conversation. But, again, this is just what has been put out. I look at some of these numbers, and it's one of those things. If you've ever been through an exercise about budgeting, and maybe in the public domain. So I went through Leadership Charlotte many years ago, and one of the things they do is when you're with the city and county people, is they say, all right, you got, there's a misconception that it's easy to budget for, all these things, or why don't we spend more money there? Well, when you have a limited pie, and they actually walked us through the exercise, well, if you want more money here, where are you going to pull it from? And there's no good place to pull it from necessarily. So you're going to have to make sacrifices. So
Yeah.
similarly, if you start adjusting again, it's a dollar. That is the entire pie. So, you have to decide where you allocate all of these things. And like I said, some of it overlaps. So, reinvestment in innovation, is interlinked with the growth engine with sales and marketing. So it's just, so if you look at it from a different perspective and combine those two ranges together as minimum and maximums, maybe you're okay with that perspective in how you allocate it. So, again, welcome any discussion on any of these numbers, but as we said, the cost to deliver the management and infrastructure, so you have both variable and fixed costs. And I think that maybe not as overtly, but most buyers will go through an exercise on this and see. They may not necessarily reduce it to, 100 cents and divide it that way. They are going to look at the financials and put them in categories. It may be the same categories that you have them in your financials. Maybe, they look at your general ledger and look at all that information, or maybe they reclassify certain things, which is wouldn't be surprising that buyers may have a different perspective and say, well, it looks like that you guys are spending this and that, or where this owner return profit and distributions. Well, I see that you've allocated actual dollars to that, but what about all of these other things that are under maybe expenses for the company car, or maybe these other things, these other perks that really, if you recast and recategorize, should be under owner return for profit and distributions because you're not having to pay for a car, you're not having to pay for this, you're not having to pay for that. So again, this is just a matter of perspective and I guess the aggregate knowledge of wherever they found the data. And I could probably go back and find out where the source data came from in the algorithm. But and then, again, with the primary objectives with private equity, cash flow optimized, so they categorize that as lifestyle, and then family succession, which they label it as built to last. And so, and you see the objectives down there. It also talks about owner dependence, which I think factors into the algorithm, where, that with PE, as I said before, they might want you on board for a period of time. Usually, what you'll see in those arrangements and those scenarios is that they will have rights to hold on to you for a period of time, whether it's a year, 2 years, 3 years, but they can, upon reasonable notice, let you go. And depending on how and why you're getting paid. So let's say that the consulting agreement compensation is really just a reallocation of part of the purchase price. Not saying that you should do that or not do that. There is a proper way of doing that, and a wrong way of doing it, so that there are tax consequences associated with that, and also maybe puts in jeopardy the integrity of the asset purchase transaction, and the consideration that is actually paid. So you need to be mindful of that. You can't just throw money into a consulting agreement that was really purchase price money. Having said that, there's various ways to have that business divorce after the fact. So you put in triggers, whether it's an earnout, whether it is just over the passage of time with a consulting agreement. So there are ways to push money down the road and basically hedge bets on the seller owner and the seller's business. And so, as buyer's counsel, it is my job to push back on that significantly, which I am in the process of doing. Have a client who and opposing counsel who is concerned that it's the 18th of the month and they have an LOI which expires in 12 days. And I told them I'm not happy with the way that they have returned back their own draft of the asset purchase agreement pretty much back to its original form, meaning completely ignored most of our changes, which were basically to move the assumption needle back towards the middle versus all the way back to the seller. It may be, kind of, common sense that a buyer and buyer's counsel wants a clean a company as possible. They want the seller to tell them everything is great, and if it isn't, it's all your fault. And you need to tell us, give us a crystal clean company. And if it's not, then we need to talk about it and we need to allocate that risk. The problem is in most cases, the buyers have allocated that risk on the shoulders of the seller. Vice versa, what is reasonable as a seller? You know the most about your business, and you should be held accountable for telling a buyer everything about the business. But then you get into skirmishes where it is, well, um, Adam is an owner of a business and I am a key employee. And I've been working for the business for maybe 2 years. Adam is the founder and has been doing that for, over 2 decades. And they want me personally to make representations and warranties about the business. Um, I don't want to do that because I've only been there for 2 years. I like Adam, but I haven't, been around for the other 18 years that he's been running the business. I trust him, but yet I don't want to put my neck on the line. And so it would be inappropriate for a buyer to ask to do that. And so those are the kind of things that come up. But, in doing this analysis, and I'll tie it together, a buyer going through this analysis and seeing where you have been spending your money, and maybe even seeing a budget of, let's say that there was an offer on the table that occurred in September and October, let's say even November last month. And it is at a point where you had already gone through and started your budgeting process, hopefully by that time. And they can see, all right, where have you been spending your money? Where do you intend on spending your money? And they see the logic and they like what you're doing, then that breeds goodwill into the transaction that, a buyer is, they're still, you know, on their toes doing their due diligence, but it shows them that you know the business, you know what you're doing, and that you haven't been overspending on any category within these categories. So I've said a lot, and I'm going to stop there and see if there's been any questions, comments, or if anybody else wants to jump into the
Yeah.
discussion.
So I've got a comment. First of all, and I've got a request. Jack, I want you to put this in the chat if you can,
Okay.
so anybody can pull this down because I like the simplicity of a buck because we can get kind of lost in spreadsheets and all the financials, but this keeps it simple, which I really like. Secondly, all three of us have seen lots of deals, and we've seen surprises on the faces of people that weren't prepared and they had something knocking at their door, or they actually needed to do a fire sale or whatever, and they couldn't believe how low the multiple was compared to everybody else in their country club or wherever in their sphere of influence because, well, why did Joe get X more on the multiple than I did? Well, this chart actually has some of that to do with it. And we've talked about other things like, hey, are your financials clean, etc. Um, on the converse side, I can say from our experience, Adams and mine, and here at BGW, we weren't looking to sell, period. Um, and the thing that we did with Ascend is pretty cool because it allows us to remain independent, but scale together and ascend together with these guys, which is really cool. But I can tell you this, we got 2.2 times more on our multiple than anybody else did. And what was interesting is the things in your chart were absolutely true. We as owners took less out of the company than our peers. We were reinvesting in our people. We were reinvesting in technology. We were reinvesting in marketing, but not per se. Like we were doing more guerrilla stuff. Like, I mean, this weekly webinar, it's freely given, but because we're trying to serve people, it's come back. Our podcast, same thing. We don't monetize it, but man, if you go to serve people, but it requires money, and we just chose to put our marketing and sales money in more guerrilla tactics that are more personal than just buying a bunch of ads in the business journals, or whatever. No slam against the business journals because I was the president of bizjournals.com and I'm a huge fan. But nonetheless, I think the numbers don't lie. And we've seen that time and time again. But it just was very clear when I saw your chart here. I was like, oh, yeah, that resonates with us.
Yeah. And I think the thing that jumped out at me too, Jack, is that can you bring the chart back up again?
Yeah, I was trying to save it so that way I could hyperlink it. But yes, keep talking.
Oh,
I'll get
okay.
it
Yeah.
back up. I'll get
Cool.
it back up. And quick, 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 quick.
By the way, while we're waiting, oh, there you go. Simplified AI, Tom Lamont, we need to have him back on here because he's not trying to sell a proprietary system. He does have a really great boot camp for making AI work for us. So we're going to actually go through that too. That'll be one of our expenditures as well, so we can learn. But yeah, this is really good. Go ahead, Adam.
Yeah. So the other thing that I think gets lost on people sometimes, if you kind of look at the middle column of lifestyle versus the PE, is that, people get kind of hung up on the owner return profit distribution percentage, and the thing is though, again, it's very obvious, but the middle column company isn't growing much. So if you just said, like, let's put real numbers here, it's growing at 5% and the profit distribution may be $500,000, you know, that's why it's the lowest multiple, is because it's like it's clearly not growing a whole lot and dependent upon the owner. Whereas the PE back, its owner profit distribution is $5 million. Which if you're a $5 million EBITDA company, it's hard to be dependent exclusively on the owner at that point. So,
Hmm.
that's like when people look at this and they think in terms of percentages, like at some point the absolutes take over. In terms of like it's just because the PE stuff is just in a different category. I mean, once you hit that $1 million in EBITDA number, it's like you've proven that you know how to grow and scale. And that just hitting that bar alone, even if you've got a little bit lower profit margin, that's worth double the multiple, from a private equity standpoint in real practical terms these days. With that in mind, I'll shut up, Jack. That's enough out of me.
Yeah, that's good.
I'm still trying to figure out how to get this to everyone. So, eh, yeah, you guys keep talking. I'll figure it out.
All right. Well. So, Papa Joe, first of all, Merry Christmas to you next year. I mean, next week. But you've been on here pretty much since we started, which I really appreciate. And you always have some fun commentary. And so, one of the things you said was, I would submit that 50 cents out of every dollar is wasted by the government. I would concur. One of my biggest disappointments is that, I had a lot of great hope for Doge, and I've had, family and friends that have been impacted by Doge cuts. All right. So let's just call a spade a spade. However, we all know that there's a ton of waste, and I'm disappointed that that machine is not still running full, tilt. But it was breaking a lot of glass too along the way too. Who knows? There's some speculations that Elon got out because his life was being threatened. Who knows? I don't know. It makes for good conspiracy theories, but nonetheless. And Joe, you did mention cybercrime insurance. So plug for NFP because they have, and we're not tied to anybody specifically, but man, they got on that cyber insurance bandwagon really early on, and that it's a real deal. I've had my last company that I did a turnaround on, cybercrime hit. I mean, and they had ransomware and they were shut down. They did a first one, which was like, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they paid it. Then they got hit again for millions, and it shut down their plant for, I think, over 10 days. And it had a ripple effect because it massively messed up supply chains for window manufacturers that were depending on them. And it's like, man, that's no joke. So find the right one. Okay, Jack, thank you for putting that webinar chat
You
or
may have
that.
to redistribute that to everyone because I don't think I can do that.
Okay.
But to kind of your point on the technology as well, what we're seeing is, and I've said this before in the M&A context, but also in the traditional lending or equity infusion, in the due diligence phase, a lot of questions being asked about technology. I think people are more convinced these days, rightly so. Not that this is now newly going on, but people trying to, it's like a game. You have gamers that are hackers that are trying to infiltrate into systems, and you have, the Norton antiviruses and the McAfees and others fighting as hard as they can against this. And so I don't think that any system is completely uh, protected and shielded. I think that would be naive to think that. I mean, even like the Pentagon computers and everything else, we've heard about hacks or certain hacks or attempted hacks kind of thing. So when I look at this chart and I look at the numbers that's associated with reinvestment and innovation, but then I look at risk, compliance, and insurance, that's what I'm talking about as, is it really 8 cents on the low end when you combine those two and 13 cents on the higher end that is there, and I look at, okay, the lifestyle and family where it's even lower than that, and so there's certain, like I said, this isn't anything that we, the three of us, or our respective companies back or publish. It's just something that I found, but I can find points of disagreement here just based upon what's going on now and where you should spend your money. Should you maybe reallocate a little bit from your growth engine and sales and marketing and put that back in, and to me, that's like going on offense, going and finding, that new prospects are growing the ones that you have versus protecting the house and protecting the house that you've built from somebody coming and tearing into it. So, again, I think this is one of those it depends charts in that it depends on what you have going on in your respective businesses and what you've already invested in and what the risk is. I mean, if you are engaged in significant electronic commerce, if you are doing all, relying upon others and giving them the keys to the kingdom because you have to, be mindful of that and, trust but verify. So, we all have plenty of war stories, and one I will share with you is that I had a client who was had been burned somewhat by a prior trusted individual within their organization, and so was very careful and methodical about the next person and the next person and the next person that was working for them, and was getting to a point where they were going to hand over the next set of keys that opens up the next lock of access into their systems, including being able to issue credit cards, open up accounts, and those kind of things. As
Oh
it turns
man.
out, received a call from this person's former employer's counsel, legal counsel, in-house counsel, and said, "Hey, we understand that you may have this person, your client may have this person employed. Want to have a confidential conversation about some things and want to find out if you guys have experienced that." I mean, the initial goal from them was to see if we had experienced anything like that and we could join forces to prosecute the theft and the embezzlement. And we had not yet. We were on the verge of it, so kind of very much a blessing and to be able to stop that before it actually happened. But in retrospect and kind of just looking back and auditing that situation, um, could it be that could have found out? So there was a lawsuit that was filed against this individual, and it was in federal court. So if you were to do a search, probably would be able to find it. But again, it's one of those things where are we really going to go to that extent necessarily? But at the same time, you can do criminal background checks on anyone you wish, really, if you have a legitimate reason. And employing someone is a legitimate reason, right? And so just be mindful of those things too, that it's easy to get comfortable and say, okay, we got it covered. And so we're going to reallocate money that was normally for defense into sales and do this and do that. And not to say that you don't have to be super conservative and not take any risks, but I think that you need to be mindful in going through this kind of analysis on the micro level, as Gary said, taking a single dollar, 100 cents, and allocating it, I think is a useful exercise.
I agree. So we've got a still nice crew that have been on here, 20 people. So if you guys have any kind of end of year questions as you're thinking about trying to ramp up into 2026 and you want to stump the chumps of the three of us, or you've got other thoughts, or you just want to pick our brains, hit us, man. Strike while the iron's hot.
Yeah, we didn't
Well,
want to go
hey,
too heavy into a whole lot of things as being the last one, and we wanted to leave open, a little bit of time for anybody has any questions about anything that we've covered or not covered or anything that's in front of them. Again, a friendly conversation, not legal or accounting advice, which was it's funny. That concept is universal. So I hadn't been to our HOA annual meeting in several years and was just curious to see kind of what's going on. And they did a good job of managing the time and keeping questions to a minimum. Uh, they had the voting for the new directors, which was also very interesting because there were four candidates in two spots. Um, Apparently
hmm.
one of the candidates threatened to sue the HOA, and I'm like,
Oh
I
gosh.
don't think that that person's going to get elected. That person, in fact, did not get
Vote for
elected.
me or else.
Right.
Great slogan.
Um, but then, it was, opened it up to the shit show that is a lot of HOA annual meetings, which is, okay, let me tell you about the problems that I'm having at my house, or why are the shrubs not cut appropriately, or this or that, or why aren't you doing this? Having been on that specific board many years ago of the HOA, in my mind, I'm like, we're all volunteers. Why don't you start a committee and go handle that? Why don't you get in your car and go around and then submit a proposal for sanctions instead of complaining and pointing fingers and saying, you seven volunteers should be doing this. So, similarly, it is like, okay, um, just it is just again funny that um, people are being harsh on uh, people who are serving in any case. But having said that, the three of us have very thick skin, so you can say whatever you wish at any time, and we will not take personal offense. I may not send you a coffee card if you win one, but that's
Oh.
the most harsh. I'm kidding. The most harsh thing that might happen. So.
So, Papa Joe, you asked a good question here too. Do you all believe that online influencers can have a greater impact than traditional marketing? And I think I got to tell you, like I've seen it firsthand with my son's shoe company. They started with nothing. I mean, nothing. They started with a Kickstarter campaign, and everything that they do is on social media. And a lot of it, like it was not paid at all. They had no money, and so they just were posting stuff on Instagram, and I think they eventually went to TikTok too, but just like their own stuff. And then they did an influencer marketing thing with a guy that's done a number of like Iron Man and stuff like that. Eric, what's his name? I don't remember, but and there was a point where that was actually effective, and then there was a point where it wasn't effective. But what I would say is that that landscape keeps changing so dramatically that you've got to kind of keep your fingers on the pulse. And I think that if you think that there's a single silver bullet strategy, don't buy that lie, because I don't think that there is. And that's coming from a guy who spent a lot of my career in marketing. And I'm probably one of the biggest skeptics. But what I do believe in is find the experts that really know that area, and but first know who's your audience and know where they are at. Where I see a lot of people dump a lot of money and it's just like burning money in the street, where they aren't real clear on who they are. They aren't real clear on what they're offering. They aren't real clear on their unique selling proposition. They're just using a shotgun. And it's kind of like my neighbor who would brag about putting, 10 pounds of fertilizer on a half acre lawn that was weed infested. Like, well, dude, that's just not enough. The concentration is not enough. So I think to use Jack's favorite legal term, it depends. It depends on who too. And the other thing that I would say is, like, if it's not you, like, look at Mr. Jenkins, right? Morris Jenkins. That guy has done a really good job. And he wasn't, hiring somebody else out, but their culture was really good. They knew their unique selling proposition. Like, they were students of scaling up and Vern Harnish and that, uh, you know, coaching platform, but they really took it to heart. But just be yourself. Make sure you're authentically you and not trying to take a playbook, a page out of somebody else's playbook, because it's like, David trying to put on Goliath's armor. It didn't work. David was
That's
familiar.
an amazing example, Gary, in the sense that it's funny you say that because I was thinking about this the other day when I saw a commercial for Morris Jenkins. And for those of you that have been around for a while, weren't they the ones who were in the van and they were doing silly stuff and they had, I can't remember the kid's name, and it was just, just trying to be silly to be remembered for being silly. And then you see the evolution of their marketing strategy right in
Yeah.
front of your eyes. And it became more serious, less trying to be silly. And then it was, client testimonials, customer testimonials. And then it was, we're open till midnight. They've kind of
Yeah.
gotten into a little bit of the silliness of, okay, what's your favorite Pop Tart over a CB radio kind of thing,
Right.
basically.
Right.
But they just, and the jingle that's in your head. I mean, if you've watched commercials here, you've in Charlotte, even as soon as the music starts, those first few notes, what it is.
Yeah.
You may not know that they do beyond HVAC, they do like plumbing and other stuff, but so yeah, I mean that is just and it is, as you said, recognizing your audience and recognizing who you are. And maybe there was a time that it was appropriate to, in people, because I remember thinking, God, that's a really stupid commercial. But then after watching it over and over again, at least I knew whose stupid commercial it was. And
Yeah.
then I don't know if it was purposeful or if it was just a natural evolution of their marketing strategy that they said, all right, we're going to start out with something that people will remember us by, whether it's good or bad. And then we're going to transition that into something that they will remember us for good, for the good stuff and not for being silly. So, again, was it organic? Was it that they have a new marketing campaign company behind them? Was it a change in ownership or leadership? Was it a private equity group that came in? I don't know, but I will tell you there was probably a reallocation of some of these cents that are in this dollar, because I would imagine that their current commercials cost a lot more. They look much more
Oh
professional
yeah. Oh
than
yeah.
two guys in a van yucking it
Yeah.
up about getting kidnapped by aliens, I think, or something. So.
Yeah. Yeah. And it does come back to, if you're going hunting for elk, you aren't bringing a shotgun. You've got a rifle. And a lot of times people are swayed by, oh, well, look at their follower count or whatever. Well, it depends, if you're trying to be a mass market thing, but if you've got a very niche and specialized thing, man, go, you know, have the rifle because you're hunting elk. So just a thought there. But Bruce Anderson, you had a really good question here. And this is really probably for you, Adam. Any change in treatment of foreign taxes paid in 2025 in terms of treatment in this coming year IRS income tax reporting?
Not in terms of the usage of them. There's been a couple little clarifications that the IRS has come out with, and then, some limitations. If you've got private equity holdings that have foreign holdings, but generically for Joe taxpayer that's got foreign taxes paid either on the company that I own with foreign operations, or alternatively, if I've got foreign taxes in my investment portfolio, because that's just part of what my investment portfolio has. No real changes.
All right, that's good. Um, Going around the horn for last call. Anybody that wants to? Yeah, you're welcome, Bruce. Thanks for being on here too so many times. Same way with you, Joseph. He was making some quips about his HOA. He said they couldn't last 30 minutes before it goes to a screaming match.
Yeah,
I,
I was
you know,
impressed.
they do bring out the worst in people, like, and then you're like, these are my neighbors. Like, I think when you're looking for a house, you need to be shopping for the neighbors as much as you are for the house. But we kind of lucked out. We only have 5 in our HOA besides us, but that also makes it the burden extremely high when we have to repair a private road or whatever. So anyway, um, wishing everybody a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and yeah, thanks, Jamie. Always good to see you. Thank you for the nice intro that you made for. He introduced us to a nice client of his that will be on the Anything But Typical podcast, hopefully in February. Hopefully, we'll get him recorded in here. So let's see what else we got here. Oh, from New Jersey. Hey, Randall, good to see you on here too. Merry Christmas to you, bud. Always good to have you on here. Merry Christmas to you, Joe, and to all a good night. It's night in India right now, so you betcha. All
Well,
right.
yeah,
Hey,
thank you all very much. It's always a pleasure to share things with all of you, and it makes us all better business owners, I think, and just sharing our skill sets because I know that many of you do that as well. And so we appreciate all that all of you do for our community or your respective communities if
yeah,
not here in the Charlotte area.
yeah. Well, we will put this thing up on the BGW YouTube channel, and Shoemakers got their own channel that they'll be doing the same. And let's finish 2025 off strong. Think about all the blessings from it, the lessons learned, and let's hit the starting gates with our track shoes on in 2026. Man, I'm ready for it. So,
That's awesome.
yeah.
Thank you guys.
See
Thanks,
y'all.
guys.
Take care now.
Talk to you
Bye
later.
bye.
Bye.